The sun hit my face. As soon as it hit my face, I was in my body and then I wasn't. I was on the other side and I was in the most beautiful garden I have ever seen or experienced. Everything within my sight glowed with this almost golden sort of rainbow light. That was the most love I have ever felt. Can you tell me more about your guides? Because I haven't heard about that in a lot of other NDE stories. Guides are Gail, Jessica and Peter. I was able to recognize them and walk up to them. Not everybody is meant to get to know their guides in each human life. I want everyone to know that they are never ever alone. I have guides and that's wonderful and I can see mine. But so do you and everyone listening. Every human on this planet has guides, has a higher energy, whatever you want to call it, source. God doesn't matter. There's somebody walking with you every moment of your life. My near-death experience was in 2021 Christmas. And before that I am a wife, a mum, but I did have quite a unique job. Before, I was in mental health and addictions for maybe a decade. That's what I went to school for, social work. But in 2015 I accepted my gifts as a psychic medium, a medical intuitive, a healer and an animal communicator. It's hard to remember them all, so I always say I was born different. So I was like an 80-year-old, 3-year-old. It didn't make sense that I was a kid and doing kid things. I was always introverted, a little bit more quiet, and I could see people that other people couldn't see. Until I was about, I can't remember, 4-ish. I didn't know that other people couldn't see all the people I saw. So I just thought adults ignored some people, and I didn't quite get why. Again, I was just mom, right? And I've always with work because I kind of make my own schedule. I take summers off to be with my kids, and I take most of December off to be home. I'm a Christmas crazy person, which I don't know why because horrible things always happen at Christmas. But I still love it, and it had been And in Canada, we did have some pretty strict rules we had to follow. Even in 2021, that was going to be the first Christmas since COVID that I could have family and friends over. I always do a huge Christmas Eve dinner with like 40 people, so I was so excited. But the few weeks leading up to it felt weird, and I just thought, all of us probably feel like that because of COVID. We did a day of decorating gingerbread houses with the kids, my old foster kids and my husband. It was an amazing day. Then at night around 8 NDE or something, we were going to watch a Christmas movie because it was December 23rd. We were all excited. The next day was going to be our first big dinner. But I started getting the worst headache of my life. So bad that I couldn't even see straight. I thought, you know what? Guys, I'm just going to go to bed. I feel horrible. Apparently like an hour later I texted my husband and said, could you bring me some Tylenol and Advil? They were still watching the movie because my head hurt so bad. He brought them, and apparently then I went into unconsciousness. I took the medication and thought I fell asleep. The doctors think I probably started having the stroke around 11:30 at night. I didn't wake up until 4:45 in the morning, and I woke up completely paralyzed on my right side and non-verbal. I could only say 2 words, my sister's name, and the F word, which is really great. Essentially, I tried to get up to go to the bathroom. I tried to stand up not knowing I was paralyzed and I fell to the ground. Then I couldn't move or get up and I couldn't reach my phone or a light. I tried to army crawl to the door but I couldn't. There was a wall and I hit the wall really, really loud, which woke up my husband, and actually my mom as well because they were living in my basement suite. My husband came into the room and I was clearly not well. He knew right away it was a stroke because he had some first aid training, so he called 911. We got to the hospital, but the damage was already done in the midbrain. They wanted to life flight me to another hospital because where I live, they can't do neurosurgery. They don't have a neurosurgeon. And so that's what they decided. I was going to be life flighted. They let Mike go with me. And all my family came to say goodbye because the doctor essentially said, more than likely she will die before she gets to the other hospital. So they even told my kids, who at the time were 12 and 14, and they said, say everything you can to your mum because more than likely you won't see her again. I took off in the helicopter with my husband beside me, and that is where I went to the other side. The sun hit my face, and my husband went to cover my eyes because I was also getting a fever, which can happen when you're sort of near death. Your body can heat up. And I looked upset because he was covering my eyes. The sun was hitting my face. As soon as it hit my face, I was in my body and then I wasn't. I was on the other side. Like it was that quick. I could see my body. I could see my husband. But then all of a sudden I could also see my kids driving to my house, and I could see my sisters. I could see everything the whole time, but I also wasn't in my body. I woke up, or not really woke up, I just opened my eyes. I didn't go towards the light. There was no tunnel or anything like that. I just woke up, opened my eyes, and I was in the most beautiful garden I have ever seen or experienced. I don't think Earth could have a garden like that. I opened my eyes and I was wearing a beautiful white dress. I didn't have shoes on. My feet were on the grass. Looking around me, I was in a field with so many flowers. There was like a little pond type thing, and then a gazebo that had a creek running under it. And my guides, who I already knew. Because of my work, I worked with my guides all the time. They were sitting/standing by the gazebo. Then sort of to the left were my crossover loved ones. 2 of my grandparents, my mother-in-law, and my dogs, because that's helpful. I just, you miss your dogs when they're on the other side. But then there were some things that I was like, well, that's a little bit odd. One of my dogs that was still alive was there. She was 17 and a half, and she actually ended up dying 4 days after the stroke while I was still in the ICU. So, she was like certain people that have Alzheimer's. They're kind of in both places. I'm assuming that's why I could see my dog that was still alive. But also my husband and my kids were there because I was there to make the choice of whether or not I wanted to come back. I think for me, if the choice was leaving my kids to suffer, I obviously would have come back no matter what. So I needed to know that they were going to be okay and I was going to be with them no matter what. Then kind of to the right and up like the field, there was a giant group of people from all time, dimensions past, present, future, all genders, all races, all cultures. Those, and I know a lot of people don't believe in this, and that's okay. Were all of my other lives. It was just to show me the interconnectedness, I think, of our paths here, but also our sort of journey within our collective consciousness. As I was standing there, it felt like I was there for 50 years, 100 years. I could feel through the grass. Everything around me and everything within my sight glowed with this almost golden sort of rainbow light. That was the most love I have ever felt. There was no pressure, but there also were no words, like physical words. Not one word came out of my mouth because everything was telepathic. You think it, and everyone around you knows it. They think it, and I know it. I didn't run up to like my Nana, who I loved. Her so much. We were so close. You'd think you see somebody that's been dead for a decade or maybe more. I didn't run up to her and hug her because you didn't need to. You just knew what everyone was thinking and feeling, and you could feel their love through the love that was all around me. So all of that I could pay attention to, while also checking on my family. It is very true that when somebody is dying, especially someone like me, I was obviously a youngish 40 when it happened. There's a lot of bargaining. If you save her, I promise I will do X, Y, Z. If you let her live until I can see her again, I will. Almost all of them were bargaining and panicking. My sister, poor girl, I talk about her and it's probably embarrassing, but anytime she's under stress or someone is hurt or sick, she has a horrible bellyache. She had to go from the hospital to her house, which is like a 10 to 15-minute drive. Not only was she panicking and bargaining, but she really needed to get to a bathroom. However, she didn't want to stop anywhere because she wanted to pack her bags to go. Also, it was Christmas, and the next day was Christmas Eve. My sister has young kids, so everyone was panicked, everyone was bargaining, everyone was sad, but also everyone was shocked. There wasn't a ton of crying because they were shocked. I could also see me and my husband because at that point I had gone into unconsciousness. He was panicked. He doesn't like helicopters, so he was nervous about that. The weather was not great, so he was nervous about that too. Unlike me, he knows nothing about medical anything. So in his mind it was going to be okay, and he wasn't going to listen to the doctor. So it was a lot happening at once, but for me, it was very peaceful. I didn't feel like a lot was happening because it just felt like I was home, and I was being given this amazing gift of time to make the decision on what I wanted to do. Did you recognize them right away as your past lives? How did you know that was also you? Because you know everything. As soon as you're there, you understand everything. I often say there are no whys. There's never a why. Why did I do that? Why did I make that choice? Who are those people? What do they want to say? There's no the who, when, where, why, how. On the other side, it just everything makes sense. Not only did it make sense that I was so connected to all of those people, and that they are all either living right now in this present time or other times or other dimensions, I also was very sort of connected to what I was going to do for the rest of my life if I stayed, and what all of my family would do for the rest of their lives if I chose to not come back. Nothing felt confusing. I just knew, because even though they didn't look like me, some of them looked similar but they didn't look like me. It was like they were all me, so I didn't need to kind of go, okay, who are you? Hello, when are you living? How are you living? It was like, okay, I remember that life and I remember what I looked like and I remember that path and everything I did. You just know everything. I think it's a blessing and a curse because I wanted so bad to remember absolutely everything. Every moment and the amazing enlightening things I was learning and participating in. Even though I remember quite a bit of it, it does fade. I call it like human amnesia. So the things that I got to see or feel or hear start to fade so that I will stay here. Because let me tell you, it's so much easier there. Coming back into a paralyzed non-verbal body that couldn't eat or talk or do anything, I definitely wanted to go back. Can you tell me more about your guides? Because I haven't heard about that in a lot of other NDE stories. I think again it's unique to each person. So in a way I think we do sort of manifest. And I think this is where people's argument of like, you made it up, because you saw what you needed to see or wanted to see, and somebody else might just see black or it might not feel good. For me, I had a relationship already with my guides. My guides are Gail, Jessica and Peter. Gail and Jessica were sitting there. Peter is a part of the collective consciousness. His name is not Peter. I named him that because his name is weird, like K or Raw or some weird thing. So it feels weird to call him that. I don't. I call him Peter, which I know is weird, but it works for me. I had such a close relationship with them already that I could recognize them and walk up to them. I think a lot of people see what they call either angels or guiding light or something like that, because not everybody is meant to get to know their guides in each human life. If you're not meant to, or if it's not part of your path, then they probably won't come and show up in your NDE. Maybe it will be a grandma or a loved one that says, oh, you know what, you have to go back. Right? Not everybody will get that gift of their guides being there. But my guides, because they knew me so well, and I had been working as a psychic medium in partnership with them since 2015, it just made sense that they were there directing me. It was kind of cool to see their actual physical self. You know, when I do work, I can feel them. I can see them if I really need to, but not like concrete humanly. I couldn't touch them when I'm like now if they stand in the corner of the room, whereas I got to hug them and I got to actually feel their energy and the guidance that they've been giving me my entire life. They were so great at sort of helping me understand the outcomes of each decision, and also the things that would happen if I went back. I think that was super helpful in making the decision, and I could argue that no matter what I was going to come back because we do plan our lives. I needed the NDE and I needed to go to the other side in order to sort of live the rest of my life. But it did feel like a decision, like no matter what, there was no judgment. Whatever way I wanted to go, they were there for me. Were you presented with the decision, or did you just know coming there you had to decide whether to stay or to go back home? I think I just knew because, again, you don't have to necessarily talk. But while being able to sort of see everything, they also helped me to see and understand the good, the bad, and the ugly. So they did say, you know, if I chose to go back, the next 18 months would be the hardest time of my life, and I would regret my decision. I would wish that I had stayed, and I would be very angry. It was really true. When I woke up, I was on a high for 2 or 3 days, and I just had this glow of the other side. It very quickly went away once I realized, oh wow, like I'm paralyzed, I can't talk, I have tubes everywhere, I've been tube fed, I couldn't go to the bathroom, I was so brain injured. All the things that they said I would do, I was like, yeah, right. Obviously I was dreaming, because how am I going to get to where they said I would be? You know, doing public speaking, talking about the collective consciousness, writing books and inspiring people. How will I do that if I can't talk? You know, how can I do that if I can't walk? I didn't understand that what they said was actual reality, especially because the doctors were pretty much saying, yes, okay, she survived. My husband actually decided not to do the brain surgery. We got there and I very quickly had a grand mal seizure and then continued to have seizures until they got a bunch of meds in me and helped stop it. Once they got the seizures stopped, the neurosurgeon came to my husband and said, I know she came here for brain surgery, but the damage is kind of done. They did another scan and my stroke was completed. The other one had stopped. I had had TPA, which is a very, very strong blood thinner, and so surgery is super dangerous after TPA. He said, I can still do the surgery if you want, but more than likely it will kill her. So much damage is done. It would be minimal improvement after the surgery. My husband had no idea what to do, and there was nobody else there. It was just him. He asked the neurosurgeon, if it was your wife in that bed, what would you do? The neurosurgeon replied, I wouldn't do it, I just wouldn't. My husband then said, well, you're the expert, I'm not doing it. And so I didn't get the brain surgery. I think the doctor then just sort of said, how she is how she's staying. He said, as she's in the ICU, if she survives this in the next couple of days, you're going to have to start looking at long-term care. She's going to need care for the rest of her life, pretty much. She's going to stay how she is. I also was blind in my right eye, so I would be half-blind, non-verbal, paralyzed, never able to eat because I had no swallowing reflex. I had no bathroom cues or hunger cues, so I wouldn't be able to ever take care of myself. Everybody was saying that for those first couple of days. Everybody talked about me around me as if I couldn't say anything. The doctors in the room were saying, this is her. She's pretty much a vegetable forever. For the type of stroke I had, your 5-year survival rate is between 14 and 28%, so it's not great. But then I went from being paralyzed non-verbal and unable to eat or drink. By day 4, I was walking. I had words within a few days, not good and not expressive. I lost tone, so I talked like a robot and kind of like a baby. But I started walking. I got the tube out of my nose. I started eating after a few days. I was able to go to the washroom. They took out the catheter and everything. Within a week I was up and moving around. They were still doing a lot of tests. I was still in the neuro ICU for 2 weeks. But they couldn't explain it. Also, when I woke up from going to the other side, I wasn't blind anymore. They can't understand it because I was completely blind. So I think 6 weeks after you get out of the hospital, you go for a follow-up. I went and I had a walking stick because I was still learning to walk. But I could talk. I could eat. I could do whatever I was doing in rehab. The neurosurgeon actually called down to the emergency room to see if anybody who was there when I was brought in wanted to come up to see me walk. They just could not believe it because I was young, my kids were there, and it was Christmas. All these nurses were just devastated that this was going to be my life and that these kids had their mom taken away on Christmas. In my chart at the very top it says, I am his miraculous patient. The only reason it's a miracle is because I shouldn't be here. So, every time I go in, I've had a lot of health complications. The doctors look and they're like, oh, so you're his miracle patient? I'm like, yeah, that's me. So the stroke was in the middle of the night on the 23rd. I stayed unconscious for almost 24 hours after the seizure. So that was just December 24th. On December 25th, actually, my husband. Have you watched that movie, The Santa Claus, where they go to Denny's on Christmas because they burned the turkey? Anyway, that's what my husband did. He took the kids to Denny's for Christmas dinner and they came to visit me. But I was in the neuro ICU, so you can visit for 15 minutes or something like that. The neurosurgeon just happened to be coming by and I still hadn't talked or moved much. He said, I know your mum can't talk, but have you tried singing with her? Because speech is on the left. Well, speech is a bit confused, yeah, on the left, but singing is on the right. So they sang with me and I sang without being able to talk 2 songs with them. Christmas songs, and so for them, that was like a Christmas miracle. But no, Christmas was on pause. We celebrated Christmas the day after I got home in January. But I think my first video that they recorded of me was like the 27th or 28th when I walked. So it was still, even though it was amazing and a miracle, it was a freaking slow one. It felt like dragging my feet through cement for every gain. It didn't come, even though they said, oh wow, it's amazing. For me, it didn't feel like that. It felt like it was impossible, and I felt like such a burden. To learn to talk again, you have to. So like one word, they say the word. I wouldn't be able to say it. They would show me how to say it and then make me repeat it 7 or 8 times to try and get it stuck in my head. And we did that non-stop. I also was kind of like a baby. You have the emotions of a child. I was explosive. I would cry or laugh at inappropriate times, which is just part of having a stroke. I was angry, and angry that this is their life now. I just couldn't understand why I made this choice, and I had such a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that, I'm making my kids and my husband suffer. It felt almost selfish that I chose to come back. Not forever, but for quite a while. I also was on very, very strong anti-seizure meds. And it made me not only feel very, very sick, it made me have the urge to unalive myself, which is a side effect of certain seizure meds. So usually when that happens, it's just like people who take antidepressants and anti-anxiety. Sometimes the medication doesn't agree with them, and so you have to switch. They tried switching me. It almost killed me. So I had to stay on that medication for 6 months to protect my brain. I was battling, trying to recover, doing rehab, struggling with my process, and trying not to give in to the side effect of that medication, which is super hard. I was very open and honest. I talked to my family. I got counseling and stuff. They all knew it wasn't actually me. I didn't want to, but it was the medication, and there was nothing I could do about it. I always say it was like a bad country song, because it's like I had the stroke. I also then got COVID. My whole family got COVID. The COVID almost killed me. Then I got COVID pneumonia. One of my dogs died when I was in the hospital. Then my next dog died in March, and that was like so devastating. It was just like one after the other. Every time it was like, okay, I feel a little bit better, something else would happen. Somebody would get in an accident, or somebody would get sick, or I would get sick, or I would have a TIA. It was non-stop. My guides were very right that the next 18 months would be hell. The first 6 months were the hardest. They also took my license because I had a seizure. When you have a seizure, you have to go on medication, and then you have to be seizure-free when you get off that medication for however many months. So I lost my license for the first year. But it just slowly kind of got better. As I got more independent, it got better. Then the sort of cycle of every time I had a positive, a negative would come, or 10 negatives would come. It started just going away. Better things started happening. Then I just started feeling inspired again. My guide started sort of speaking up again. I felt very disconnected from them for a while. At one point they said, you need to paint. You need to try to paint what you saw on the other side. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm brain injured. I can barely write. What do you mean I'm going to paint? That's ridiculous. So I ignored them for a good couple of months. Finally they said, just try, just try. I started painting and I couldn't stop. I tried the best I could to start painting what I saw on the other side, and it just got better. Then things presented opportunities. People asking me to tell my story, which they said I would do, that it was going to be so helpful to help people not feel alone, like this human world is so isolated. We've never been more connected and more disconnected at the same time. It's such a strange world we live in. Everything just started happening for the better. They had said I would write 3 books, and I'm like, can't type anymore, can't write anymore, barely have words. I don't know what you're talking about writing a book. But everything just fell into place, and every single thing they said was going to happen has happened so far. So now I just work on faith. Faith that there's a point to all of it, because it's still hard. Even if you didn't know me, you wouldn't know. I know all the time, every single day, I am missing almost 25% of my brain, and it doesn't grow back. I don't know why I thought it did. In my mind, I just thought, when you injure your brain, yeah, your brain's injured, but it's still there. No, it slugs away and you have a giant hole in your head. And so then you can have other little strokes because all of that brain isn't supposed to be exposed, but it just started happening for the better. I don't know another way to explain it than I just had faith that they wouldn't have put me in my family. Or I wouldn't have, because I planned this life. And my family through this, if there wasn't a purpose for it. I am not a patient person, and I have learned more patience for myself and for other people. But also, my whole life I felt so alone. Even with my kids and my husband and family and friends, I could be surrounded by people. And I just felt like nothing made sense and that I was kind of this lone island. Going to the other side and understanding that there was not one moment in my entire life where I was ever alone, not even a millisecond. My hardest times in my life, I was surrounded by people who loved me, I think that was a huge takeaway for me because my whole life I felt so different and I just felt like I never fit in with any group. Even people that I knew loved me. I felt like there was something wrong with me. Occasionally still no, not occasionally. 50% of the world does think there's something wrong with me. You know it's not okay to talk to dead people as a job or as a calling. It's not okay to talk about these things not in a religious tone or whatever it is. But I have never felt more that I belong than when I'm thinking of and talking about the things that I now know to be true. Before I accepted my gifts, it was very out of control, like they were just always there and I didn't understand. I could see them, but I didn't know how to talk to them. I couldn't have a back and forth like we're having, okay? And so it was just confusing because there were all these extra people around and I didn't know what they wanted, or even if they wanted something. Maybe they were just hanging out and they actually didn't want anything. Once I accepted my gifts, they only would come around for a purpose. So it wasn't like they were just always around me. Occasionally they are now just in support, but I knew what they wanted. I knew how to talk to them and how to get the message across. I didn't know how to set boundaries, so in the beginning, I live in somewhat of a smaller town. It's not tiny, but a smaller town, and they would want me to go up to people in like restaurants and stuff. I was like, no thank you, that absolutely, like how long before the whole town thinks I'm completely nuts. And so I learned how to set boundaries. It's not okay to say you need to go tell that cashier that her mum is with her and whatever. So I started to be able to set boundaries. My gifts didn't sort of turn on all at once. The mediumship was first, and then my psychic gifts. And that's the one I fought the most because when I was religious and I was still going to church when I accepted my gifts, the psychic was the part that they were like, like that's kind. That's like, what do they call it? A false prophet. And so that part was harder. Then after a while, I'm also an empath, like a super strong empath. So I always say I can read souls. I don't necessarily listen to sometimes what's coming out of people's mouths because I know how they feel behind those words. It's not good for relationships because sometimes nobody wants you in their head and they don't want you tuning into their soul. So it's a lot of boundary work. Then the medical intuitive and the healing came. And then the animal communicating came after that. For me now, it's just everyday life. I have what I call a light switch. So when I'm working, the light switch is on. Right now, even though this is more like an interview about me, the light switch is on. My guides are standing in the corner of the room, helping me to tell the parts that they really want to be heard, as well as my stuff. And their thoughts become my words. So when I'm actually working, I sort of put my human self to the side because I think I'd get really tired if I didn't. Their thoughts, just like on the other side, it's telepathic. Their thoughts become my words. Before the NDE, I would kind of have to listen and then repeat, which is okay, but I think a lot can get lost in translation. Or like maybe I don't interpret it correctly, or I put emphasis on a different thing than they were intending. After the NTE, once I had the experience of complete telepathy, it's so much easier, which is crazy because I'm missing so much in my brain. I don't know how it's so much easier, but literally they think it and their thoughts come out of my mouth. So I don't have to interpret, I don't have to listen and repeat, I don't have to clarify. Once in a while I argue if they're trying to say something that I'm like, really? You think that's going to be helpful, or it makes me uncomfortable, like I don't think I want to say that to that person. But it's so much easier now and I can do it in a much more connected way, if that makes sense. I want everyone to know that they are never, ever alone. I have guides and that's wonderful and I can see mine, but so do you and everyone listening. It doesn't matter what your religion is or what your beliefs are. You can be an atheist or a Catholic or Jewish, whatever. Every human on this planet has guides and has a higher energy. Whatever you want to call it, source, God, it doesn't matter. There's somebody walking with you every moment of your life. People don't have to believe that. I had an NDE and went to the other side and got to make that choice and that sort of stuff. That's fine. And you know what? Like I know there are people that really think our brains can do that, right? Can have this crazy dream and that sort of stuff. But all of the things that have happened since all the things they said would happen, have all happened. I think it's just a testament that they are with me, that they weren't lying and that I'm not making them up. But just that we aren't alone and that there is a purpose to everything. Our collective consciousness as a whole is growing. We are going to be seeing more and more people like me being born. You know, in the 80s when I was born, it was nuts to be a psychic medium. Like you called the 1-900 number the 1-900 dial a psychic, and you paid like $2 a minute to get your whatever. It wasn't average, it wasn't normal, it wasn't common. But as the collective consciousness is moving towards becoming more connected, more children are going to be born like me, feeling like they don't fit, feeling completely alone even as small children. If there's somebody that can tell them, hey, you know what? There's a reason you feel alone. There's a reason you feel like you're so different. And it's because you're this wonderful little soul that's lived a lot. And you know you're going to get it. You're going to feel like you make sense at some point. It would have been so helpful for me when I was young if somebody could just say, there's nothing wrong with you. You are not this horrible person who is causing bad things to happen. It's actually not you causing them. That would have been so helpful to me. Can you tell me about your book? Yes, so it's called At the Stroke of Eternity, and I started writing it. It came out a year ago. Somebody helped me, so I talked and they typed. It's also written now. Looking back, I would change so much just because I didn't have a lot of words. I was still learning to talk, so it is a very simply written book, but it talks about everything. So a little bit about my childhood then, about the stroke going to the other side, and then all the lessons that I learned. It also has pictures because I like pictures in a book. Oh, here I'll show. So there you go. It's right here. It's beautiful. Yeah, and so it has pictures. It has poems at the beginning of every chapter because I also wrote poems. I wrote poems before the stroke. I'm just trying to see if my brain is there because I know people don't believe me when I say I'm missing so much of my brain. Oh, there we go. There's my brain. So whoops. This is the main stroke, that big white area, and then a frontal lobe stroke, because afterwards so many people were like, yeah, right, I've known people who have had strokes, you have not. I'm like, I don't think I could fake a stroke like that. It doesn't necessarily make sense. But then, I also started painting, and so some of my paintings are in there as well. I don't do anything with the paintings, they just kind of sit here, but I enjoy it. I have fun with it. That's beautiful. Yeah, but then the last, each one of my guides has a chapter at the end, so there's a chapter for Gail, Jessica, and Peter. And then there's a chapter on boundaries because it's so important when you want to do any type of spiritual work. One on being an empath because it's hard. It's hard to feel everybody's feelings, especially in this world when there's so much anger and hate and that sort of stuff. Thank you so much to Amber for sharing her story. This was one of the interviews that I've been most excited about, and I hope you all enjoyed. My name is Lauren, and I do the interviews on this channel. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for all the really nice and really interesting comments that you've been posting. Second of all, if you want to see more of these types of videos, make sure to hit subscribe.